and go ahead.
We are Hagens, Berman, Action. My name is Chad Childers. I am joining my boss and our director, Axel Merckx. Today we are talking with a former rider that was part of the second generation of riders, Joe Dombrowski, who, while a member of Trek Livestrong in 2011 and 2012, won the Baby Giro, was fourth at the Tour of Utah, 10th at US Pro, and has since gone on to win the Tour of Utah in 2015, and last year was 12th at the Giro d'Italia. Joe, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Joe. Thanks for catching up with us. We've been in touch, and I think you're one of the riders that kept in touch over the years, even though it's been a while now, I guess, since you've been on the team. But off and on, I think we remain to keep that relationship. And it's what a story. I think you incarnate exactly what the program is meant to be, which is give a kid, at that point you were a kid, sorry, the opportunity to. Well, you might be a kid.
We're all getting old.
That's true. But you are exactly the example of a success story of the program, and so we'll just start from the beginning. Where when you started. I know you were doing cyclocross and mountain bikes, and you did some local road races, and through Bart Nax, which actually back then was my boss. He was actually my boss with Lance. Put me in touch with somebody that knew you, but I mean, I'll let you tell you the story from your perspective on how you got to know the team, if you heard about the team, you're interested in the team, why this team compared to something else. So I'll just wait to hear from you.
Yeah. So I started, well, as you said, initially my contact with the team was through Bart, who was Axel's boss at the time. And it was a friend of mine, Chris Hayes, who went to school in Austin, Texas, was good friends with Bart, and they had always remained in touch over the years. And Chris lives in my hometown, and he saw me kind of coming up through the ranks, and I was mostly racing on the mountain bike and cyclocross, and I was starting to do some road racing and doing well, kind of locally. And Chris sent an email to Bart, I think it was kind of he just sort of threw it out there like, hey, I don't know how you guys find kids for the team, but obviously you've got a really good program. I think this kid's got some talent. Just keep an eye out, And I actually didn't know that he had sent the email. He just sort of did it out of the blue. And at some point, I got an email from Axel, which was totally unexpected. And, just touching base like, hey, what's your plan? What's your schedule? And we had some back and forth, and there was a spot to stagiaire with the team at Tour of Utah in 2010. And I remember I came out like 3 or 4 days ahead of the race, and we were in kind of a host house with the rest of the guys. And it was, at that point, definitely the biggest race I'd ever done. I remember Axel asking if I had free time in my schedule to do the race. And it was like, of course you're going to say yes, right? But I remember emailing back saying like, well, I'm actually a Cat 3 right now, and I have to upgrade to a Cat 1 in time to do it, and yada, yada. And I think some people at USA Cycling helped out a bit in expediting that so that I was able to do the race. And Axel and I sat down at the end of the week, and he said, hey, I've got a space for you next year. If you're interested in coming along, let me know. And yeah, I mean, the team, I think it had been around 2 or 3 years at that point.
Yeah. 2 years. I mean, the 2009 was the start of it.
Yeah. So it was still pretty early on, but I mean, it was really successful, and a lot of young guys, you know, winning races and on their way to turning professional. So I saw it as a huge opportunity. I was still in school, and I went back to school again in the fall semester. And then my plan was to essentially take a break from school from the spring and focus just on racing, and, you know, see how far I could go with it. And we started the first part of the year in the US. Redlands, I think, was my first race. It didn't go so well. I think I ended up on the pavement. And then we did a bit of a block of racing in the US, I think finishing with Gila, which, if I remember, went pretty well. And then we went to Europe and did, I think, Flèche du Sud and Ronde de Lizard. And that also went well. I think I was third in Ronde de Lizard, and George was second. And it was my first race in Europe. I distinctly remember being scared, totally shitless. Just, you know, it's like, it's such a different, if you've only raced in the US on the road and you're used to big roads and, you know, there's no road furniture, there's no roundabouts, there's not anything really tricky about it. You know, all of a sudden you're on small roads going left and right and roundabouts, and people are hopping on the sidewalk. And, you know, if you're not used to that, it's scary. So I think I remember at Ronde de Lizard, it was my first days racing in Europe, and the first stage or two was flat, and then there was two big mountain stages. And I think I spent the entire first two stages sitting last wheel in the peloton, just, you know, like 2 meters off the back, kind of looking around everyone, afraid of a massive crash. But yeah, in the end, it worked out well. And I spent 2 years at the team. Started in 2010, did Utah, and then did all of 2011-12 with the team. And then in 13, I turned professional.
Yeah, it was actually your first race, from what I recall, was actually Cascade. I don't know, we did Cascade before that. That was your very first. I remember
right.
that. Yeah, so Bend, Oregon is obviously not super altitude, but it's pretty much up there. And I remember we went there with a team that was prepared to go to altitude, and you came from Virginia. You came from dead flat sea level, and I wanted to give you a shot, and like, hey, do whatever you can, no pressure, you know, kind of let's see what happens. And I think the first uphill finish, you were right behind Team Rowe, which was actually our climber back then, and he came from Boulder, you know, prepared for altitude, and you came from sea level. You were right behind him, and I was like, damn, I hope nobody else saw what I just saw, because the guy that's able to basically, with no preparation, no training, you were fit. It's not like you were not fit, but I was like hoping, and then I was totally planning on catching up with you in Utah, and I remember, you know, like I'm sure every first race you did with us, I think you crashed. I mean, it was one of those stories that, man, if that kid would ever learn to stay on his bike during the race, it's going to be amazing. It's going to be a shocker. And then actually, when you mentioned something about Redlands, that first season, I think it was the first stage that you crashed, and you had like stitches on your elbow. It was pretty nasty. And then the next day, I think you went and rode 200 Ks by yourself. You just went on the train. Yeah. And I was like, where is Joe? Where did he go? Because we went to race, we came back, he was still not back. And I think you rode up to some kind of mountain there. And yeah, there you go. 7 hours later. It's quite a success story for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that. We got lost. I think there was like, we were meant to come down some canyon back to LA, and it was closed, so we had to go like way around.
Yeah. So what was your first impression? Because I mean, what was your background behind that? I think it's interesting to tell everybody exactly what you were doing before, because yeah, I mean, you mentioned you were Cat 3, but basically you were going to school, and then you were just riding for fun, or would you do like some mountain bike races, some cyclocross? What did you race on?
So it was mostly I was racing mountain bike and cyclocross, and I would say when I was around 18, I started racing more on the road, and I was kind of balancing that with school. And at the time it seemed like I was training a lot. Now it doesn't seem like so much, but just kind of balancing everything. And I wasn't racing on the road long before kind of this whole connection between Bart and then speaking with you and then with the team happened. And actually, when you look back on it, it happened really quick. Because like from 2009, I was really only just getting into road racing. 2010, I stagiaired with the team. 11 and 12 did with the team. And then 13, I was in Sky. It was like, whoop.
Yeah.
Maybe too fast.
Yeah.
Joe, I was going to ask you, what do you think when you look back on the first year versus the second year? A second ago you said, my first race or the first couple races didn't go that great. But then you have this like bang out 2012 season. Comparing the two, I mean, was it just natural progression? Was it something clicking? What do you think that was kind of attributed to?
I think it was a combination of natural progression physically. I think it was being better in the race, moving around the peloton, saving energy, just knowing how the race worked better. And I think, also a big component that's kind of intangible, but I think is one of the most important things is just confidence.
Sure.
It's like in my experience, when I've had great success in races, you go into that race with the mindset of like, I'm going to win. I can win, And I think that's something that's kind of developed over time with, and like success builds on success kind of thing. And I think 2011 was kind of a stepping stone, and then 2012. And I think that's not just for under 23 riders. I think that's for everyone. It's like when you have that confidence and where you belong in the bunch, and where you can be and where you're capable of, I think that's kind of, it can flip that switch,
Yeah. What is interesting to me is that your comment, the previous comment that you just say, like everything went on so fast because you just started to race basically, and from the moment you started racing on the road, basically, let's say 3 years later, you were like on Sky, and you said, oh, everything went too fast, or maybe too fast, obviously, we live in an era where some athletes are eager to move up and to go up so fast, and I know your story is a little different because your background was very limited in bike handling and positioning in the peloton and stuff like that. What's your thought actually on those when you see juniors going straight to the world tour and doing really well? Obviously, that's there's no, I mean, Remco is an unbelievable story and talent, but what's your perspective of it? Because I think you find it very intriguing from your side of things when you said, yeah, it was actually maybe a little too fast.
I remember speaking with Rod Ellingworth, who at the time, he's now at Bahrain. Now he's at Bahrain, before he was at Sky. And one of the first things he said because Boswell and I went to Sky together the same year. And I remember we walked in the room and it was kind of him and Brailsford and some of the other people in management at Sky. And the first thing he said to us was, don't think that the hardest contract to get is turning professional. The hardest contract to get is your next professional contract. And it was kind of like, okay.
Yeah.
But to be honest, I think that's true because, when you turn professional from the under 23s, you've proven yourself amongst the best of your age group, right? But then when you get to the world tour level, everyone was the best of their age group. You know, there's no one that signs for world tour teams that was, you know, kind of not there. So the level is so much higher. And I think that jump can be really difficult for guys. And I do think you see a lot of guys that they make it to a big team, and then after 2 years they're out. And I mean, luckily that didn't happen with me, but I think it does happen. And sometimes it can be better to take your time, stay down one more year, and then, you know, have a successful run at the world tour. Because like I was saying before, I think that confidence aspect and the way you build on your confidence is a big part of your success. And if you go too early and you're just getting kicked down all the time, it's difficult to kind of find your place, you know?
Yeah, it's kind of complicated also because, I mean, with the results that you had, I mean, you know, you finished third in the Station Tour California, uphill finish, you know, like
Right.
It was Mont Baldy, like nobody knew about you. And there's a kid from that small development team that's staying with the best, you know, like you won the Baby Giro, you were with the best in Tour of Utah, you know, all those, you know, the success stories, the hardest stage race, you know, like you mentioned is hard, like the results were there. You know, the maturity level is a different story, you know, because you were not from Europe and you had to sell yourself to Europe. So is there something that, I mean, you can't go back in the past, you know? So would you have waited, if you, in perspective, would you have waited another year and sit it out? And like, considering that, you know, you have the best team in the world knocking on your door and say, you come to us. And I think they offer you a 3-year deal. At that point, I think you signed for 3 years when you went there, which was probably the best thing you could do at that point. But would you have said, like, for example, Theo did, you know, he turned down Sky for a year and said, no, I'm staying with Axel one more year. And then I think I'll be more ready the year after. Do you think in hindsight, you should have done that?
I think it would have been a good idea. I mean, that's what you told me to do. And at the time, it's like, it's hard to say no, you know? I would say the only thing which is totally out of anyone's control is, if I look back, I was maybe a little lucky in when I went to Sky after, like, really starting in May, my first year there, I started to have this iliac artery issue going on. And if I look back on it, like, if I had waited and I had that going on, then for a professional team to sign you, maybe they're a little bit like, maybe it's a risk to sign this guy. So I guess if you took that out of the equation, I would say that I think it would have made more sense to stay down one more year. But I also see it as I was probably a little bit lucky in that I had a contract in hand, because sometimes, like, an injury like that, you can't really control. And I mean, as you know, because you've been a rider too, it's like sometimes if you have, let's say you have a bad crash and you break your leg and it happens right as you're out of contract, it's not really so nice.
Yeah. Those are tough situations to be in, for sure.
Yeah. I think for, I mean, it's difficult because for young guys in general, I would say it almost never hurts to stay down one more year. I think that experience can be really good. I think you can get a lot out of it. But when you're a professional rider and you've gone through a few contract cycles, you also start to realize how it can be kind of fickle sometimes, you know. And if you do, I guess, as to say, sometimes when there's a good offer in front of you, you just want to take it, because you don't know if tomorrow, if something bad happens, an injury, or you get sick, or you just aren't going well in the races, it's good to have that security too.
Yeah, but can't you see like a compromise between the two situation might be ideal for a young athlete, which is, yes, you have a great team knocking on your door, and instead of going right to that big team, which is very difficult for a team with a big budget to do, but just kind of say, we'll take care of you, we'll give you a guaranteed contract for next year for X amount of years, but in the meantime, we want you to go for that development in one more year, because obviously they help you a lot. They put you on the radar, and I think they can still contribute to the development. And no matter what happens, you kind of guarantee that contract the year after. Don't you think that would be maybe the best of both worlds, or is that?
I think that's the best. Yeah, and there's a number of ways. Obviously, you can structure it. I mean, you could have an agreement to sign a contract, or even maybe it's possible that like you can sign a contract and they pay and they say, but stay down and we want you to develop one more year. I think there's a lot of ways of doing it, but I think probably, as you said, I think probably the best way for most guys is if you can have the security of having an agreement with a World Tour team, but they also say, stay down 6 months or stay down one more year in full, then it gives you time without pressure to continue developing, but you also have the security that, okay, I have, you know, a 2-year NeoPro contract at least going forward.
Yeah. How hard was it, just because you mentioned your injury and you know, you went up pro and you kind of got injured fast in your pro career, you went to Sky and stuff like that. How hard was it for you as a young athlete to come into that environment and then to deal with that injury and that uncertainty of am I going to be okay? And share your experience with whatever you want. You know, like, was it a positive experience? Was it a negative experience? Did you have a lot of support? Did you find a way, or people that kind of like stuck by you in a way that no matter what will back you up, or were you more left on your own, or how what kind of process did you go through in that situation?
I would say it was a pretty negative experience for me, in that it went on for a long time and I didn't know what the problem was. And I also didn't get much help from the medical staff at Sky in terms of like getting to the bottom of the problem. So it went on for almost a year. And then in my second year at Sky, we kind of finally sorted out what was going on. And, you know, it involves this surgery and it's a pretty long recovery. So I more or less didn't race. I think I did a couple races in the spring and Tour of California in 2014, and then the season was done. And I think in that regard, I felt like I was kind of navigating it on my own. And I felt like the lack of support kind of drew everything out over a long period. So I felt like there was a lot of lost time. And I would say I was also really concerned about if, you know, doing this surgery and all of that, if I would basically be able to be, you know, still a professional cyclist in the end. Like, was this sort of career ending, or is it something that I could bounce back from? And it was stressful also because obviously that year, so 2014, I was out of contract with Sky. And it was a bit like, well, I'm not racing. I'm going to do this surgery. They offered me one more year if I wanted to stay. But then it's like, are you interested in staying given how it's going? And I was lucky to still have opportunities after that going forward. So in the end, I think there was good that came out of it, but it was, I would say, kind of a stressful, negative period.
Was there a time when after your recovery, that you felt like you turned the corner, that you righted the ship, that you started feeling like, okay, I think things are getting better. I feel better. Was there a momentum change?
Yeah, I would say, you know, 2015, I went to Garmin. Well, it was called Garmin at the time. And the 2015 through first half of 2016 season was like a really good progression for me, you know, because actually I hadn't really raced much. I didn't really race hardly at all in 2014. 2013 was my first year. We were dealing with these injuries. But, you know, 2015 was going better and better. I mean, I was top 10 in the GC in a number of stage races. I did win Utah and won a stage there. And then 2016 was my first Giro, and I was there helping Rigo Uran. And but in the end, in the second and third week, I had a bit more of a leash because, you know, the aim was to go there kind of for him looking to podium, but he sort of started to slip, and I had this freedom to go on the break, and I was really present on a lot of the mountain stages, you know, both in the break, but also in the GC group with really the best guys, and was up there in a number of finishes. I think I was third on the Queen stage. So it felt like a really good progression out of, you know, coming out of an injury. And you also kind of want to show people like, yeah, I'm back, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's natural. How did you find out actually about that injury? Because it's something very particular about cycling that is reoccurring, and it's happening more and more. And like you said, it's been career ending for a lot of athletes out there. How did you finally figure it out? That's what it was. What was the symptoms, and how did you find out?
Well, essentially, it's like they don't know exactly what causes it, but over time, sort of the repetitive hip flexion from being on a bike. They say also speed skaters can get it. It can damage the artery into your leg, the iliac artery, basically because it sits right in front of the psoas, and like the muscle can kind of crunch the artery, and it responds with this sort of arteriosclerotic type like lesions inside, almost like a smoker or, you know, a obese person would have, which obviously is not good for professional bike racer.
Yeah.
So usually it presents like in one leg, and it's, for whatever reason, it's more often the left leg, which was the case with me. And I just found that anytime I would ride hard, it was like one leg was fine and one leg I just couldn't push, you know? And it was strange because, you know, you have like numbness in one foot and kind of these twinges. And I felt like, I actually thought maybe it was like a spinal thing or a nerve problem, because it's like, you know, if you kind of fall asleep weird, maybe on your arm or something, and your arm falls asleep, and then you wake up and like your arm's just numb. It's kind of like that, but on the bike, which it's like, obviously you can't really race at a high level like that. So, and I knew some people that had it, and we did some tests with the doctors at Sky, but the problem was we didn't really do the test properly. And so it got kind of pushed off. And finally I was like, look, I want to see a vascular specialist about this, someone who knows what they're doing. If you're not going to let me see someone, then I'm going to just have to find someone myself. And we saw a doctor in London who, he was actually a cyclist himself. And basically it's super easy to diagnose. They just use a blood pressure cuff on both ankles at rest, and then you get on the bike until you have symptoms, and then they take blood pressure again. And if there's a drop in blood pressure and it in the affected limb, then it's like, you know, you probably have the problem. So basically then they can do further tests to confirm it, but basically then you either have to do a surgery to try and fix it, which usually nowadays is successful. Obviously they can't guarantee it. Or, I mean, it's not that you can't ride a bike anymore, but it's probably going to be difficult to be a professional rider.
So when you I mean, I'm going to close that because I'm sure you've been talking about that injury quite a bit, and you know, we want to come back to where we were originally with the team. You know, like when you came to the team. I mean, I'm looking at the roster right now. I have it right in front of me. When you look at the 2011 team, and those are, you know, that was probably one of the, I mean, I hate to say it, one of the best teams that we've had. You know, like with all riders, almost all of them, or like 3/4 of them, turned world tour at some point in their career. What was your best memory? It doesn't have to be on the bike; could be off the bike with the group of guys. What was the spirit? How did they welcome you, the guys? And because you were very well unknown. I remember also when, you know, after 2010, I talked to Jim Miller, which was in charge of the performance at USA, which he still is now, or is again. And he's like, so you need to get Dombrowski over to Europe. You need some experience, and you need like they never heard of you. So I'm sure though your teammates, when they saw you coming, I remember, you know, like you were like an innocent kid that nobody knew about. How was it? What perspective? What memory do you have of those moments?
You know, I think we talk sometimes, like the other riders that have been in the team in the bunch. You know, I find Ben King or Dowsett or George, any of those guys, because, you know, obviously we see each other at the races. And I think everybody would agree it's like the most fun we've ever had in our whole career was on that team. I mean, not that it's not fun now. I still love my job, and I feel really lucky to be able to do this as a career. But just the camaraderie amongst the guys, you know, everyone's kind of around a similar age, pursuing the same goals. And I don't know, it was just such a fun time. Like the races were fun. We had fun traveling together. You know, there's an element of like, you're going to Europe, and now there's some Europeans on the team, but also we had a lot of Americans, Kiwis, Aussies, and, you know, some guys haven't spent a lot of time in Europe. So it's also like culturally, you're seeing a lot, you know, also just training together. I mean, I remember before Utah, maybe in 2011 or 12, we all stayed at Conor O'Leary's house. And I remember he had a bunch of Vespas in his garage, and we would all like go out training, and then in the afternoon we'd rip around on Vespas and ride across the valley and go get frozen yogurt and then ride back home afterwards. So it was a fun time. Like, I imagine it sort of being like the cycling version of, you know, a lot of guys, some guys still went to university, and, you know, you allowed us the opportunity to do both. But a lot of guys put that aside in the interest of pursuing cycling. And university, for a lot of people, it's kind of this fun time for young people where you're living away from your parents for the first time in a new environment. And it was sort of like this cycling version of that. And it was great. I mean, just traveling around, being with the guys, the camaraderie, and, you know, the kind of ambiance I found to always be really good. And yeah, I think I'll look back on that always as probably the most fun I ever had.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a broken record now after a few of the guys that we've been interviewing. Yep. It sounds almost like it's a vacation camp that you guys when you when you came to the team.
Maybe you should think about starting like a world tour team, and then you can just sign us all back and we can bring back.
Well, that's right. That'll take a lot of money, but hey, that'll be a fun team to do for sure, absolutely, and a lot of great talent. And I think, you know, like that's one thing that strikes through me. That one of the things I'm so proud of is that you guys look at it, like, not only because it's a lot of fun, but also that, you know, you're able to learn a lot. You got to know new people and keep a relationship for a long time. Exactly the way you said. To me, this team is more like a university of cycling, in a way. Like, you know, before you get your real job, you know, you need to get those 2-3 years, and yes, you'll have fun. You make mistakes, but at the end of the day, you'll be judged by the best result that you have, and you'll deserve a spot in the World Tour, which is very very refreshing. So is that the best advice you can get a kid or a guy or anybody that comes to you and ask, hey, what is it that I have to be and I have to do, or what do I have to expect coming to that program?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, obviously everyone's really motivated, but I think motivation for cycling, it comes through love of doing it, and so I think focusing on having fun, and that I think comes naturally in the team, is kind of the way to being successful. And I don't think that's only in cycling. I mean, if you look at people that are successful in all sorts of things in life, I think a lot of times what you see again and again is they love their job. Even it's like, I asked my dad, because we had this argument recently about, he said that his job was better than mine. He's an aerospace engineer.
Oh.
And he was like, you have to take too much risk, blah, blah, blah. You have to race when it's raining and all this. And I'm like, okay, wait a second. Here's a question. Let's pretend from tomorrow on, you're still going to get paid the same amount you get paid now, but you don't have to go to work. You can do whatever you want, but you're still going to get paid. No worries, no stress. Are you still going to go to work tomorrow? And he was like, probably not. And I'm like, okay, because I'm still going to go training tomorrow because that's what I want to do. So if you love it, and then I think you can go far. And I think, loving it is having fun. And I think in that team, you have a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's so important, so crucial, because, I'm pretty lucky. Realistically, I haven't never had to work a day in my life because I've always been lucky to be able to do what I love, or to be involved in a sport that I love. And obviously I was born into it, and I was raised into it, and it was kind of, the path was kind of set in a certain way. I decided to go a different way, but it is so true though. And people, that's the best advice that I can give my kids, if you find your path and you find something you love to do. And I don't understand why my daughter loves swimming so much, because I don't get it. Why would you go back and forth in a swimming pool looking at a blue line at the bottom of the pool and go back and forth? I keep giving her a hard time about it, but that's true. That's the essential of it, and then once you have that, you never have to work a day of your life. So that's, and I'm glad. And I think Chad maybe can experience that, because Chad has only been with us for a few years, but that's really what transparent is, that everybody on the team, really, from the swingers, the mechanics, PR, directors, it's work, and it's maybe more work now than it was before, but it's still a lot of fun in this team, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what? I was going to ask real quick before I forget, because all of a sudden we're going to get off of here, and then I'm going to be like, I knew what I should have asked Joe. I don't know how I came across it, but I saw a video that was, I think, put on or produced by Seasucker, who is also one of our sponsors. And it was, I think it mentioned that you liked antique cars, and it has you in a Porsche. I couldn't tell what year it was. It looked like a 964. I don't know what model, but with a bike on the top, and you're driving around. Is that yours? Tell me a little bit more about this antique car appreciation.
Yeah, so I like old cars. Luckily, my wife also loves old cars.
That makes it much easier.
Yeah, her dad was a racing car driver at one point, so I think it kind of runs in the family. But so that video, actually, the 911 is mine. It's a 1988 3.2 Carrera. I don't know. I've just always liked the old air-cooled Porsches.
Yeah.
And I had never used the Seasucker rack, but I just always thought like, oh, that's kind of interesting. And not that I really drive around in an old Porsche with the mountain bike on top. That was to be fair, that was more marketing based. But I wanted one of the racks, you know, because I was like, well, I don't really want a bike rack on all the time, and I don't really use one that much, but it would be convenient to have one. And one of the mechanics from EF knew, I think the guy's name is Ty Dougherty from Seasucker, who lives in Florida, and he put me in touch. And my wife does videography, and she knows cars, she knows cycling. She actually worked about a year and a half in EF. She was doing all the videos that they were producing over the last year or two. And I asked Ty, like, hey, would you do a trade? Like, if I make a video for you, will you give me a rack?
Right.
And I didn't really explain too much, but I think they were super happy with it because we rented a drone, and we put my mountain bike on the 911, and then kind of made this video driving around these Virginia back roads with the drone following us, and it turned out pretty cool.
Oh man, it was great. And when I first saw it, I was like, if he's into antique cars, is like it didn't come right out and say that the 911 was yours. And when I saw it, I was like, I can't tell if I've got to ask him about it. I can't tell if it looks like a 1990. I was like, I can't tell.
88.
Yeah, I was off by a couple of years.
Yep.
So is it something that you entertain yourself with now during those, you know, COVID-19 pandemic lockdown situation? You keep looking for cars? Is that what you're doing?
Well, I haven't been doing too much recently, but I've been driving that around. It's funny, like when this all started, at first we were over in Nice, and then they banned riding outside, and it wasn't clear because it was like, if it's your job, you're allowed to go to work. And I took that as, well, it's my job, I'm going to go ride my bike. And I made it about 1 kilometer, and the police stopped me, and they were like, you know, saying that I couldn't ride. And I tried to argue with them, but that didn't get very far. So I did about 5-6 days on the home trainer in Nice, and then I cracked, and I said to Melissa, my wife, like, okay, we should go back to the US. I don't think they're going to say you're not allowed to ride a bike outside in the US, and we'll just go back there until this settles down. And I was thinking, you know, maybe May or June we would be back racing again, and, you know, here we are. But, you know, it is what it is, and there's been elements of it that are difficult, but there's also good things. I mean, I don't usually get to spend this much time with family, and I enjoy training. I mean, I love racing, but also I think you were the same. Like, I love going out training every day, and I don't find it hard to be motivated to train. So that's been good. And, you know, I know it's a tough landscape for teams right now, but so far I've also been really lucky to be in a team that seems relatively stable. So that's good. And I do hope, just for the sport, that we can get back to racing at some point later this year, because otherwise I think it's going to be more and more difficult for sponsors. And I mean, it's just a hard time for everybody.
Yeah. Always, one thing that I was thinking about when you know, like, here's a kid from Virginia that is ending up in an American team to begin with, goes to a British team, then switches back over to an American team, and now he's like in a very international United Arab Emirates team. You know, what did you find the biggest difference, positive, negative, between all those experience that you went through, culture or approach, training, whatever you want to share? What is the main difference between those changes? Because it's a bit, I mean, it's quite a significant change in all those teams.
Yeah, you know, I think one thing that you find is, I think cycling's really good at breaking down barriers between people. Like, sometimes you think culturally that you don't connect with people because they're just different. But as an example, you know, now in UAE, it's a really international team, but it was born out of a really Italian team.
Mm-hmm.
And still a lot of the staff the mechanics, soigneurs are almost all Italian. And I remember, you know, last year, like, do I stay or do I go? And actually I was talking with you a lot about, like, you know, what should I do? Because, I mean, to sort of backtrack, Axel helped me. My 17 and 18 seasons were not so good. And it was kind of getting a bit touch and go. And I was like, you know, worried about having a contract and this and that. And Axel was helping me in 2018 and then again in 2019 in what eventually led to me going to UAE. And I would say that maybe a little bit of hesitation in going to UAE was the comfort of being in a US team. You know, if you're an American rider, it's just easy to be in an American team. Just like you see the French riders are almost all in French teams, and it's just easy.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, I have to say now that I've been in, not that we've gotten to do a lot of racing, but having been at camps and whatever else, that it's, in the end, it's kind of like, it's still just a bunch of guys out racing their bikes, having fun. And I think that it can be easier to adapt to teams that seem foreign than you think. And I think if you're really dead set on, if you're a British rider only going to Sky, or if you're an American rider only going to EF, that you can limit some opportunities that you have elsewhere. And so I think being open-minded, and I haven't really, I think from a culture standpoint, it's been pretty good everywhere I've been. And I have to say also in UAE, I've been really impressed with the team thus far. It's been well organized. It's good camaraderie. It's a really international group, but it's a good group of guys. Actually, there's a number of us from Axeon in the team.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got me, both Oliveras.
Go. Jasper.
5. Is there more?
I don't think so. Not that I can remember. I mean, but the EF was the same, and there's a bunch of our guys that were there. With, you know,
sure.
last year with Nate, Lawson, Nielsen. Well, Nielsen is there now, so he kind of missed that one. But I think, you know, like, perspective that you just kind of said is kind of when you force yourself, or when you put in a situation when you have to kind of get outside of your comfort zone, could be also something that is motivating, more challenging, and opens a little bit more your horizon. It's one of those, and hopefully we'll be able to ask him about it, because that's one of the reasons why I like to have international riders. You know, originally it was very difficult for me to attract Europeans in the team because they have so much options there, especially Belgians, of you know, development teams there, and they kind of like a cookie cutter. But bringing those mentality, also the Brits, you know, like into the team, kind of gives a different perspective on the Americans and the young Americans, and how, you know, how to approach it. Alex explained it to us very well, how to approach a time trial, because he was a real time trialist. You know, like some guys were going to him, he's like, oh, you've done that all your life, so how do you prepare for it? The mentality of it, like Jasper Stuyven is one of the best examples also, you know, like racing wise, you know. And I remember being in the car with Jasper, and he would shake his head, and like, those guys don't know what they're doing, you know. But that's all good, because at one point, like, it's giving them the opportunity to learn from Jasper, that's learned how to race in Europe, but at the same time Jasper learned to be a little bit more relaxed in his approach into racing, and not to be so serious about it. You know, I think that's the proper approach, and that's to be able to adapt to that. And that's why when you ask my opinion, and you know, you just tell us that I helped you a lot, but really the work was for you. It was just for you to make the decisions. You know, I can tell you what I think, and there's no bad teams out there. I think everybody's doing a great job. It's just what in what state of mind are you at this point in your career, and what direction do you need in order to be better and in order to improve. And that's what's really important in this program. And as we try to evolve all this, the cycles and the episode of the development of cycling, that's what we are trying to create. And that's a perfect example. And that's why I ask you, you know, kind of like, some guys really like the regimen and focus on, you know, this is what you have to do Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Maybe like a Sky would be a little bit more. Some guys like it maybe more with EF, where it's a little bit more flexible. I don't know. I mean, I don't work with them, you know. And then I don't know if UAE was something different. That's why I was kind of leaning towards that question towards you.
Yeah, but and it's also at what point you are in your career, and what you want out of yourself. You know, sometimes you need to be. Sometimes I think, you know, sometimes you see a rider go to a team and it sort of seems from the outside a little bit like, what is he doing there, you know? But sometimes those riders do really well. And I think some of that is actually being out of their comfort zone, you know, and a little bit of pressure, a little bit outside your comfort zone can be a good thing sometimes.
Yeah, when people just kind of like, you want to prove them wrong also. I mean, that's some of the,
which is a powerful motivator.
yeah. I've known, I mean, we have all watched the documentaries and stuff like that, and, you know, getting somebody angry that is talented is not very a good idea. And we all know how that works out, and that's all kudos for you. I don't know, Chad, do you have any more questions?
No, I think that pretty much does it. I do have a side one. You just have to give me an honest answer. Can you tell the difference between Evo and Rui?
Do you know something? I have a funny story actually about that.
Let us tell it.
Like I said, I haven't been racing with the team that much yet because of, as you know, and we were at Algarve this year, and the team, as I was racing, but the team also had a training camp going at the same time, and it was in the same hotel. So you had the guys doing the race, which was 5 or 6 of us, and then another 5 or 6 guys in the team also at the hotel, and we were all there together, and we were all eating dinner together. And I don't remember if it was Rui or Evo, but I sat down next to them, and I started talking about the race today. Like, you know, when that guy passed you in the race today and he said this, blah, blah, blah. And he was like, what are you talking about? I was out training. And I was like, oh shit. Like, and had totally mixed them up. And I thought he was in the race, but actually not.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, no, I don't think I can tell the difference.
No, I think there's only one person in the team that was so good about it. It was our mechanic, Trey. He was like, didn't matter who came down. He was like, how's it going, Evo? And I'm like, still to this day, I still don't know. I mean, I might run into him. I actually advised him to change their haircut because it was just impossible for me to figure it out. But that's kind of funny story.
You know, and I talked to Trey about that because, you know, I'm posting on social media. I'm getting photos. I have things, and I'm sitting there looking at these photos, and I'm like pixel peeping. I'm like looking for who does their hair which way. I'm looking for freckles. I'm looking for all this stuff, and it's just I can't remember. But Trey did say something. I can't remember what it was, but otherwise I was paying attention to who had a bracelet on what arm, who wore, you know, who was the one that had the red Oakley, you know, ear socket things, and that was the only way I'd be able to tell them apart.
Yeah. For the people listening in, basically, is the identical twins, Evo and Rui Oliveira, that, you know, UAE, that were with us also. But Joe, thank you very much for your time and for jumping on this whenever I ask right away. I really appreciate it. We are wishing you obviously a lot of success moving forward. You are a great ambassador for the program. Thanks for what you've done for the program, you're still doing for the program, and we'll be cheering on hopefully for the next few months of the season. Hopefully we can all experience some great results. But regardless, you just know that this is your family, and whenever you need, you know where to find us.
Thanks, guys. It was good to chat.
Okay. Thanks, Joe.
Joe.
See you guys.
Take care.
Bye.
Ciao.